Welcome to Keep What You Earn, your judgment and jargon-free zone for entrepreneurs of all levels. Get ready to learn how to scale your business, save money in taxes, and create a business that grows your wealth. If it feels like the financial side of business is like eating your vegetables, well then think of this podcast as the ranch dressing to make the process a little more enjoyable. My name is Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CPA and business owner on a mission to simplify money and empower others through knowledge. I hope this episode inspires you to take action, but remember that the information we share is for educational purposes only and is not individual tax advice. Now that we got that out of the way, let's start the show. When most people think of public relations, as I did for the longest time, you think of media appearances. You think of, getting your name out there, publicizing, right? Having a publicist. And it's about a lot more than that. And today's episode, we're going to be dedicating to talking about public relations at its core, what it actually is, which is managing reputation, managing your brand, and actually controlling the content you're putting out there so you understand what people perceive of you. And this is a really interesting conversation with Melissa Vela Williamson. Now, Melissa is an accredited, internationally recognized public relations expert, national industry columnist, podcast host, and author. With 2 decades of multicultural and integrated communications experience, she serves as a consultant, trainer, and account director at her boutique firm, MVW Communications. She has directed communication efforts for more than 90 organizations, and with unique experience in internal communications and DE&I, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, Melissa leverages her PR expertise and acumen as a certified diversity professional to create social good. Her book, entitled Smart Talk, Public Relations Essentials All Pros Should Know, was published October 2022 and quickly became an Amazon bestseller. I'm really excited to welcome Melissa onto the show today. We have a really good conversation around public relations, conscious communication, and how to make the most out of your PR platform. Without further ado, let's hear from Melissa. Hey, Melissa, welcome to the show.
Hi, Shannon. I'm such a big fan. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
I love that you are. I love that you're a listener of the show as well. Could you just introduce yourself to everybody listening with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Melissa Vela Williamson here. I'm a public relations strategist, business owner, podcast host, author, and national columnist about PR. I love the industry. And I should say my business is called MVW Communications. My team would really get mad at me for that. But as you can tell, I'm about people first and their relationships and conversation. But I've been doing public relations for 20 years now. And over the last 2 decades, I really learned everything on the ground or the hard way. I wasn't a traditional PR major. And so all of that's kind of led me to this point in life where I'm very passionate about sharing what's behind the curtain, how the industry works. And that led me to write the book during the pandemic, which was, now I look at it, I'm like, how in the heck did I do that, Shannon? But I think leaving behind the legacies and how-tos is a big part of our calling. And that's why I do love your shows, that you're very candid about that. But in my work at the firm, we do consulting. I coach other pros. I do workshops and trainings. And then we do, of course, the traditional PR and marketing services for a lot of specialty clients that basically use PR for social good. So a lot of nonprofit organizations, education organizations, or for-profits that really want to make the world a little bit better. And sometimes that's through media relations work or community relations, but a lot of helping. And that's what I love to do in this work, is try to intersect traditional PR tools and principles with advocacy-based, people gathering, uniting kind of principles as well. So that led me to become certified as a diversity professional, so that the steps I was advising for and taking myself and with our business was carefully thought through and strategic in that space.
Yeah. And I mean, let's just unpack public relations. I mean, it has relations
Yes.
in the name. And I think people lose sight of that. I think they see it as media coverage, me, spotlight on me, but it's public relations. Can you just kind of talk about public relations, what it means to you, how you define it, and maybe how it is similar or different from marketing?
Yeah, I think that's really important you bring up. And it's actually one of the fun little plays I have when I talk, particularly with students, is, well, what is that big difference between PR and marketing, or PR and advertising, right? Or PR and journalism? And public relations practitioners, the ones who really follow our top trade Association, the Public Relations Society of America, and Code of Ethics, and all of their principles, our focus is on building win-win strategic relationships for the long haul. So we don't want to just make a friend today to make a quick sale. That's a little more like what marketers might do, right? Marketing is about the exchange of goods and services for money. So we're having that conversation for a direct call to action, for an immediate kind of deliverable or outcome. And then whether or not you're a repeat customer or buyer, right? Who's to say? But they're looking for that immediate, like, up and down
Transaction.
blip, right?
Yeah.
Transaction, exactly. In terms of public relations, sometimes that return on the investment of the time, effort, or sometimes the financial expense can take a little longer. I talk often about, like, the work we do, plant seeds, right? And then you have to nourish the seeds in the ground. And I'm not a gardener at all. I don't have the patience for all that, but I do in my work, because just like this experience, Shannon, like, I couldn't just come to you, never listened to this show, don't know who you are, what you're about, and just said, hey, put me on your show, I'm cool. Right? That wouldn't come off great.
People do that all the time, by the way.
Oh, I know they do. And some of them are quote unquote PR pros. And, that's not the public relations point of view. Public relations is people relationships. It's relationship first. And so I think that no matter what kind of business you do or work you do, you can have that PR point of view. If you're thinking about building a community, if you're thinking about long lasting relationships, goodwill, right? Then you probably are thinking more like a PR pro, a true one.
Yeah. And so PR for me is making more people aware of what it is you do by establishing yourself with authority and expertise in something. So being a trusted person in a go-to area and just making people aware that you exist. It's very similar to marketing, but I feel like the PR approach is a very, like, rapid authority builder.
Yeah, and you're talking about what we would call, like, thought leadership, and that is basically built through time that establishes trust and credibility. And
Right.
so, when it comes to advertising, and don't get me wrong, Shannon, a smart PR pro knows about integration. So we know about integrated marketing communication. And PR sometimes is seen as part of marketing. Well, yeah, we're building or promoting something positive. I want to underline that, so that it can be thought about and made aware of for potential customers or clients or constituents, right? But the differences are a little nuanced in that with PR, we are bound by a code of ethics, and we are bound to tell the truth and back that up with action and make sure that we're following through with principles. So often PR pros, and you saw this a lot during the pandemic, I call us the Jiminy Crickets. If I had a Disney, they say, what Disney princess are you? I'm like, oh, I'm not a princess, I'm a cricket. Right? So in Pinocchio, Jiminy Cricket was the conscience of, the little wooden puppet boy. And he was telling him right from wrong and which way to go and what direction to do. So of course, if you're doing the right thing and have that kind of counsel and advice, well, your platform will be more stable as a thought leader. Because, we're not seeing someone like Shannon, who's a thought leader, you're a thought leader in your space, running around doing unethical things and then getting on your podcast and talking about what an ethical person you are, right? That kind of dissonance happens for leaders sometimes. And often I'll either wonder if they have a PR pro on their team or if they can actually be managed and corralled by a PR pro sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I totally agree.
Well, and in that space too, I think it's really important for anyone who owns their own business or has that entrepreneurial mindset to really consider, am I taking the right kind of actions in my personal life? Number one, because that intersects with business. People do business with other people and people that they like and hopefully trust. But trust takes a long time to build and it's so quick to crumble if you do the wrong thing. So I always advise not only just on, oh, this is a smart strategy in terms of communication, but if there's an issue with that person's behavior or their demeanor, that's something that we address as well in terms of leadership. And as far as an organization, we saw a lot of this in the last few years too. If they want to take a bold stance in the social space or DEI space and say, we believe that Black Lives Matter, as a PR pro, you should be looking under the hood and actually figuring out, do you have a pattern of supporting individuals from this community? Do you give scholarships to? Do you have them in your leadership suites? Is there any kind of dissonance in that messaging before we go out and externalize it?
So if I were to, it's kind of like, if I were to rephrase it or summarize it, what I'm hearing is that PR is more about, or less about, I should say, less about shining more spotlights on you and more about what are you doing when it's not shining at you necessarily. And how are you not really going on when the spotlight's on you and not holding yourself in integrity to what you're saying or doing or say you do when you're in that spotlight? So PR is a lot about behavior, right? And a lot about what you do in the dark, not just in the light.
Right. Because if we just think about being in relationship with other people and all organizations, the brand expressions that we fall in love with or start to not like, they're built by people. They
Right.
are enacted by them, but they're also like live through that experience. So
Right.
just like any of our personal relationships, we have to try to work to be that healthy person on, at all, most of the times, right? And then
Right.
ask for grace at other times. But I think that that's a big part of protecting the equity around your brand. And it all starts with that personal brand. Particularly, I see that as a small business owner. Even if I want to shine the light or share with my team or whatnot, the eyes are on me first and foremost. And that starts internally with your employees or your contractors, whoever helps you in the business, right? And then that should be also shined or spread out externally into what your customers or clients or constituents experience.
Yeah, I think there has to be an awareness too of what you say and do and how it impacts all the stakeholders, not just the customers, not just the public, not just the impression or the perception of you, but also how your employees, your team perceive you, and then what that does to the company's reputation. So there's a lot of reputation management, but also, like you said, it starts with relationships first. And it starts with how do you establish relationships? How are you in these relationships? Are you adding value, right? And then ultimately, the brand that you build up from those behaviors is going to drive a lot of the PR type stuff. And Melissa, what are some of the strategies you've seen that help people build a really good, strong PR presence?
Yeah. Well, if we want to take it from the organizational level, I would say fundamentally is always starting with a strategic plan.
Mm.
Now, there's two types of strategic plans we often hear about in the workplace, right? One is organizational, like the logistics or infrastructure of what you do and how you're going to do it and when you're going to do it by, right? And more often than not, I'll ask about that before we put together a strategic communications or PR plan. And I often call my plans strategic communication plans because, Shannon, we can't do any one of the communication types, or we shouldn't, in a silo by itself, right? You
Right.
can't build a whole brand and keep it elevated just by social media strategy, whether that's paid or unpaid social media. Like you have to even unpack that, right? You can't just keep a brand alive just by having a website out there. Well, nobody knows about it or is being driven to it. That's not going to happen. And then media relations, we earn a lot of coverage, but then there's other coverage types that you can actually sponsor or pay for. But that still will need a PR point of view on that. Is that a worthy, newsworthy, and human interest story worthy story to tell? Is the content written well? Is it, in alignment with your brand pillars? So there's multiple parts of the communication wheel that need to activate for you to roll forward. So you should start with a proactive plan, not just do a whole bunch of things and make a lot of noise. Like I hate the term buzz. I don't know if there's terms in your work
Yeah.
that you hate, but like who wants to make noise? Like, I don't want to make noise. Like if you were going to actually put on something people want to hear, like a beautiful song, there's different types of instruments that you'd put together. You'd have someone directing that, right? Orchestra, for
Yeah.
example.
You don't hum noise in the kitchen, you hum
Mm.
songs.
Some
So they
people
stick
do.
with you.
That's right. But building a relationship means that you are just being thoughtful or strategic. There's a
Right.
sound approach based on research. And so I'm an accredited PR pro, much like a CPA and APR would do planning a certain way. And so that framework is research first, right? We're not just going to, I think this is going to go well. We actually go find out what are people needing? How do we meet them where they are with this particular communication goal that we have, or this new product, this new service, this milestone campaign, an anniversary, whatever it is you want to talk about. We're looking at what are some smart things that have been done about this before? Some best practices we can kind of tie in. What are advantages do you have right now as the particular client? And then we actually will even go a step further to learn more about the customers and where they like to communicate, how they like to communicate, what they love about your organization, or, missed opportunities, right? So there's a research component. Then we build the plan based on that research insights, and then getting good and great ideas from internally. There's a lot of times our employees, particularly those on the ground or those who are working directly with customers or clients or consumers, have great ideas, and they're never asked by leaders, right? There's plans made for them that they're supposed to bring to life, and they're like, this is not even a smart move. So we try to bridge that gap too for clients. Then we implement the plan. And that's where a lot of rubber meets the road, because sometimes people like, oh, I put this plan on paper, they throw it on the shelf, never bring it to life. So much like a weight loss plan or, a budgeting plan, you actually have to do it and walk through that hard experience. And as we're actually activating, we figure out what's working, what's not. Hey, let's go from good to great over here. This tactic is really taking off, and let's evolve it or iterate a bit. And so we're actually evaluating, which is the last step, our PIE. The last step is evaluate, and we're actually doing that in real time. But then we actually debrief and say, okay, for our next campaign, whether it's this client or a different one or your next anniversary, what are the good notes and the best practices to take on and make sure that we take with us? And the lessons learned, right? We all make mistakes. People change. Our work constantly change. Terms that we should and could and would use change. And so we have to monitor that. And I think that's what having that PR mindset makes us a little more sensitive to, is because if you really are trying to care about people, you're watching for all of that constantly.
Yeah. And there might be, how do I put this, like an interpretation that, well, I don't care that much about what people think, right? We like to have that attitude of, I don't care what people think. But I feel like when you're in, I know when you're in business, there's a certain responsibility you have to be conscious of what people think, I think. And you have to be aware of it. And you don't have to really care as a person, but you should understand the impact, right? I feel like there's kind of an in-between here of, it's fine, I am me, it's part of my brand, I don't care what people think. Where do you kind of toe the line on that? And what do you advise clients on that maybe have that type of approach?
Man, I think you should care, right? If you're in business, you're in business to make some kind of money, whether that's to recoup your salary or whatever other goals you may have. So you need to care what your core and targeted customers think, how they act, behave, what drives them. I talk a little more progressively in this space, because I intersect PR with diversity, equity, and inclusion type principles. Because what I see, especially if all that sounds like a lot to someone, focusing in on inclusion, right? Just trying to respect and involve more people, doing the research about what they like and care about. If we understand what people value, what their culture is and their preferences are, like, we can meet them a lot easier. And so why not build that product or program or service with the actual feedback and needs and wants of people? So they're bought in, they feel engaged, and then they're an amazing referral source. Because most businesses, particularly in professional services like yours and mine, they're referral based. And people are referring others to us because they had a great experience, or they are really appreciating the content we create. Maybe they don't know us just yet, but they see some kind of consistency in what we deliver and how giving we are with our information and advice there. But then also, like, people want to do business with people they like. And so being likable is a big part of the PR work, I would say. And so not caring, and this is who I am, that's fine. Double down on that. And maybe you have that really niche audience, but they may not be with you for the long term. Sometimes people circle around and people go viral, posts go viral, people go viral because people don't like them, right? So they're having a great time making fun of you. That doesn't mean they're going to actually pay you anything or be with you when something happens to your brand, right? It's only a matter of time. It's not if a crisis will happen or if an issue will happen with a business. It's just when. And so being strategic and planful and having that in mind, first in our actions, but then actually building, hey, can I just do a little mini crisis plan on if my widget breaks, how would I take care of a customer? How would I communicate that? If there was an accident, if I made a wrong move,
Yeah.
publicly, right? So
Because
there's a
we
lot of,
will.
yeah,
We all will. Nobody's perfect. We're all going to make a wrong move, take a wrong turn, but we just got to know how to recalibrate
that's right.
and how to get back on track. And here's my question, Melissa. Is it ever too early to have a PR strategy? Because a lot of people might be saying, this all sounds great, but like I don't have an audience. I feel like nobody's even listening. I feel like it's crickets anytime I post anything. Do I
Mhm.
really like by just having a business, does that trigger me to need to be thinking about this stuff, right? And what goes into that? Because I think what people will assume possibly from this conversation is that we're talking about social media or we're talking about the
Right.
media, television, podcasts, etc. What if someone feels like their voice isn't heard by many and they're thinking, well, it might be too early for me? What's your advice to them?
Yeah, most of the work that we do is built around our influence. And
Right.
so when nowadays you're hearing like, oh, social media influencer, right? And we're thinking a lifestyle brand or we're thinking someone in that nature. Our world is built on storytelling, and those stories help build our brand through influence on, what was that experience like for someone who listened to that story. So we all have that opportunity to literally take the stage at any time. I want to caution everyone at any size and any age, number one, to consider social media basically a broadcast channel. So the second you're posting on Facebook or Twitter or whatever channel you want of your choice, that can live and speak for you forever, right? We know that there's no such thing really as deletion. Even if you have a bad moment, like I give tips, I have a book about PR, Shannon, for all types of pros, all types of people. And part of it is just managing social media because most of us have it personally. And what we post, what we like, what we comment on, what we share is all being monitored and is pretty much all now visible. So I've seen, and in your show is keep what you earn, right? One of our mantras is like, don't lose your money because I've seen like in a hot moment, someone's very angry, or we have all, I think, as people, had a very raw experience the last few years. Just, emotionally low moment where you put,
Survival mode, just
yeah.
a whole different mindset. Yeah.
So you're posting something nasty or you're liking a post that you're like, you represent a church and you just like that piece of porn. I've literally seen something like this, right? Where someone liked something on Twitter and it came up in my feed, Shannon liked this piece of
And it's so
pornography.
funny because, by the way, like, do you know how freaking easy it is to accidentally grab your phone and your
Yeah,
thumb hits a point and like you like something or you tapped it an extra time and you
right.
liked it? And it's so funny how much meaning we give to like my accidental giant thumbs that move the screen a certain way. It's just crazy to me. But yeah,
Or someone's
exactly.
late night, like, let's
Yeah.
just say it, right? You had a little too many cocktails and then you're like, oh, that's cool. And then, oh my gosh, then
Oh,
you're in
I
trouble.
laughed and it's like, oh,
Right.
yeah.
And they're like, I didn't know she was into that. I didn't know he was into that. And you can add that subject matter, whatever you want it to be.
Right, right.
But the higher up you are, right, the more elevated and responsible you have to be. And I will say, when you're starting the beginning, even with students, like I have young kids, I'll tell my daughter, who I just barely put a phone in her hands, and I'm very careful of monitoring that, is everything you post online, everything you text to a friend, look at this dumb video of me. What if you want this high caliber job and later on they're jealous of you and don't like you and they post it online and that becomes the
Mhm.
meme of the day? We have to be
Yeah.
thoughtful at any age that we all have. What's great about social media is that because it is a broadcast tool, you and I, for example, right now are literally making our own show, right? Our own radio, TV, web show.
Right.
And we've got that power to kind of equalize the system in some ways. But everyone does. And sometimes they don't even realize the power behind the little photo, video, and text on the phones at
Hmm.
minimum. So we see that. I see journalists reporting on things online all the time on text exchanges between, someone alleged criminal and da da da. And so I'm just want to start with that. Like, just imagine
Yeah.
one, you do have power and we can use that as leverage, but you also have that responsibility to be very conscious and thoughtful because maybe you're not that big deal today, but maybe you want to be tomorrow. And
Yeah.
so it's those baby steps of showing up exactly how you want to be perceived that's really going to help you get there.
Exactly. I was just going to say that too. Instead of viewing this, guys, with fear of being judged for what you're doing. Look at it as an opportunity to show up and showcase a certain side of you that you want to present, right? To metaphorically dress up a little
Yeah.
bit and not really and be responsible, right? But that doesn't mean to have fear. That doesn't mean to be afraid of everything you're going to say. I think there's an extreme polarization to that, right? You
Mhm.
want to be in that nice middle where you're consciously doing what you do on social media. I was part of, just for some background too, and you guys will hear this whole story from me at some point, but I was deposed in Washington, D.C. over something that happened to my accounting firm. And I ended up getting my emails taken, my whole computer taken, all of my messages read, all of my emails gone through a scanner. I was terrified. I was 23. Do you know how many
Oh,
memes we sent each other? I was 20 freaking 3. I was like second year in and I was like, I'm fired. It's over. Like,
yeah.
and then it really woke me up to, I behaved from then on out as though every email would be read to me in court and every text message would be posted on social media because, and it's not to instill fear, but it's to instill awareness of it's possible.
Right.
It's very possible. Anyone can take a screenshot of something you send them, post it on social media. Anyone can, pull your emails. Like, we don't really have the deletion control. We behave like we do. So you do have to be somewhat careful about this. And I think that, again, it's not from a place of fear, but it was from a place of awakening to
Yeah.
go, oh, there are all these possibilities of what could happen. And the best thing I can do is be ready and to be respectful and to be mindful of those things. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And guess what? If you are ready and strategic and thoughtful and are already working on that personally and how you show up on social or don't show up on social, sometimes there's times where you just sit still and let that noisy train go by because it's
Right.
not positive and you just shouldn't get involved. In
Yeah.
public
Keep
relations,
scrolling.
that's right. I want to build bridges. So when people get super political and rowdy about things, like here's a
I
night,
stay quiet because
I
I'm like, there, because you also have to look at this. This is a question I always ask myself. What result do I want?
yep.
What result will be generated? Begin with the end in mind, as they say,
Yeah.
and go to what am I trying to achieve here? Like, am I going to be wasting my time, their time, and everyone's time if I bother to comment on this? Like, how productive is this use of my time? And that's a really big thing. I think on social media, and especially the last few years, to your point, Melissa, we've been in this survival mode and this kind of like, it's almost everyone for themselves, everyone against each other type of mentality as broad society. And I think that especially as business owners, leaders in our industries, we have to show up a little bit differently and kind of set a different tone.
Yeah, and I think that I saw that very much, Shannon, in these last few years. I think I really grounded myself in, okay, it almost in stoicism, right? I read Ryan
Mm,
Holiday and his take on a modern take on
yes.
stoicism principles, and they're super helpful that when things are chaotic around you, what can you control? Well, first,
Yes.
that's
What can you actually
yourself,
control?
right? And then all that is really kind of the PR way too, is that there's a lot of easy ways to build goodwill and excitement about your business or what you're doing as a thought leader or as a professional. If you're just doing the right things, if you're helpful to others, do you volunteer in your community? Like, show that on social media, right? It doesn't just
Yeah.
have to be us talking or buy my new book or whatever, right? Giving that advice. There's so many good ways using PR strategies to make news by making good. And if you are taking these steps, when you do have that opportunity to go and, pitch an idea to a journalist or whatnot, when they look you up, because they will, everyone Googles everybody, right?
Yeah.
What are they going to find online? Well, you want them to find things that you thoughtfully kind of curated, like that museum curator about, like, what would your gallery say about you, right? What would it
Yeah.
say
If they
about your
open your
brand?
door, what do you want them to see in your first room of your house, right? It's the same
Yeah.
type of concept of what impression do you want to leave them? And I'll say again, this doesn't mean, guys, not to be polarizing because sometimes that can serve you and your brand. Sometimes you are trying to attract a polarized audience on any type of topic, issue. It could even be as simple as coffee versus tea, iced coffee versus hot. Who cares? Right? You can be polarizing, create polarity in any form on social media. But what we're saying is doing things consciously and knowing with intention and with your strategy that you're doing that. Because I think a lot of people are doing a lot of what I would consider aimless PR.
Mm.
And it's not part of that plan that you mentioned. And I think that's the one thing that a lot of people are missing is the intention and the preconceived planning of their actual PR strategy. What are the recommendations you have for people to get started with a strategy if they've really never heard of this concept before, but they're inspired to start sitting down and putting words on paper?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first is to your point, what are your brand pillars? What are
Hmm.
your core values? What do you stand for as an organization? And that doesn't the type, right? Nonprofit, for profit, small business, micro business, huge, doesn't matter. A lot of times when we do strategic planning, one of the things I recognize right away is you don't have a consistent way that you express what you do or what you care about. And people want to know those things, right? And you need to make it easier for the users, the user
Hmm.
experience. So, what are the brand pillars? Like, Shannon, if I were to ask you for your business, like, what, do you have core brand pillars or things that you stand for, you talk about a lot?
Oh, yeah. The entire Keep What You Earn framework is a whole built out structure of topics that we go through all the way from starting a new business to scaling a business to seven figures and beyond.
Right. And for some clients, like I've had Meals on Wheels in our local market in San Antonio, one of the things we figured out is the services were understood as far as like meal delivery. People got that concept because there's a national brand expression of that and they
Right.
understand that. But they couldn't understand what all they did here locally to really deliver on that more than a meal brand promise, right? Well, what do you mean by more than a meal? Isn't it just I'm a senior, you deliver a meal to my door, and that's the value you add to our community? Well, no, they had all these other services around that and programs around providing more to make sure that those who have mobility challenges and those who are elderly who wanted to live an independent life in their own homes could do so. So, for example, with them, we help build the brand pillars of by listening and talking and doing our research. Well, you really stand for nourishment. And yes, that's in the nutrition and nutritious meals that are carefully made exactly for those types of clients that you serve and are segmented into different types of client needs too. But also the nourishment of that individual because they get to have that a personal interaction with a person coming to their home. A lot of them are homebound, and so they don't interact with people every day. They don't see someone every
Hmm.
day. And so that volunteer coming by makes all the difference because they have that interpersonal interaction. But then also, like, well, there's different options. The other brand pillars, like, were care, right? And independence. And so, how do you actually stand up that pillar? Well, these are the services we have that show that we uniquely are focused on the care of these individuals. And then here are the services we have that are uniquely focused on fostering their independence, right?
I love
And
that. Yeah.
yeah, so just trying to define your brand by a couple words, even individually, like what do I care
It's almost
about?
like values in a sense, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
the values they live by, right? And that's one thing I guess I misunderstood because with brand pillars, I'm thinking super tactical. I'm thinking like my content pillars and my
yeah.
like what we teach, right? So of course, so for me it's education,
There you
right?
go.
Education's a big one. And that's also why I volunteer and donate to junior achievement. That's a huge part of what we do at Keep What You Earn is that's a big piece of what we do. And I did all of this because I love to teach, right? I love to educate people and have people feel empowered. Do you know how excited I was when I found out you were listening to the show? I was like, oh my God, someone listens to this. And I still get surprised every time that
Oh,
that you guys are messaging me saying you love the show. Cause you have to understand as a podcaster, guys, for someone to be like, I love your show. I'm like, oh my God, you watch it. It feels like a home video that I put on the
oh,
internet
I
and I'm
know.
like, oh, you've seen it.
Well, and
Don't
and
judge
I
me.
and I'll let
Yeah.
me build off that because well, one, I have my own podcast, so I feel you. It
Yes.
does feel like very echo chamber. Like, am I alone here? And
Yeah.
it is surprising to me because the metrics aren't okay. So here's the marketing part of
There's
all
no
this work, right?
visibility.
The metrics are really tough, and I will say, particularly if you're doing good work, sometimes that is not sensational. That is not a little like your niche, right? It's a little more business to business type. We're talking business on this but we're not talking about serial murders and crimes on our podcast. So it doesn't have that mainstream like deviant criteria that
Yeah, I
really
feel like a documentary
it
versus
turns
like
people
Family
on.
Guy. I'm like, of course they're like Game of Thrones. I'm like, I'm not Game of Thrones. I'm like a Netflix documentary, and I'm always a little surprised that people will watch me.
Yeah, well, and but so you have a niche audience that is
Yeah,
going to be hyper focused and more deeply connected to what you're delivering. So,
right.
but believe me, coaching you, I have to self coach a lot. the same thing, because sometimes I'm like, dang it, if I just talked about Britney Spears, the numbers of downloads I would have, like.
Yeah, same thing with viral content, all that stuff, but you got to stick with what you're known for. You got to stick with the brand.
Yeah.
And like I said, education's huge for me, but it's also integrity. It's also teaching that you don't have to shortcut to get the result you want. It's kind of that philosophy of put the work in. If you do the right thing, you're going to win.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of mentality, is like the integrity of it. So even though like we do have core values, right? I talk about core values all the time because that's something that we look for in alignment with clients and in alignment with our audience and our team. But there's also, like you said, brand pillars of the why behind. It's almost like one layer deeper, the why behind the value.
Yeah.
Like, why is that a value of yours? Because this is what we care so deeply about, that we are so passionate that we started a business because of it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I'm sure I was attracted to, I heard you on another podcast. I can't even remember. Financial literacy is a big interest to me because let's just be clear. It's scary to have your own business. It still scares me every day. I'm doing it anyway. And that's what I encourage people to do. But the education piece that you have of really sharing how this works, and the integrity comes off. Like, I just was reading a post of yours today and you were talking about, can you deduct your groceries? And I'm like, oh, can we? Right. And I love the little, like, if this and that down the little graphic grid. But it shows integrity that you're saying, hey, look, don't get yourself in hot water for things that don't really matter, right? To save a couple cents and then pay hundreds of dollars later.
Don't walk over, walk over dollars to pick up pennies? This is not the question you should be asking. That is exactly my point, where I'm like, if you have to ask this question, you're worried about the decimal point in the wrong place.
Right. And that is strategic. So that resonated with me too. So I would even say, so sometimes when we're working with clients, I'm like, okay, so this is what you care about. I would consider using these terms a little more often in your content when you talk. And then for your content categories, or literally what do you write about, post about, want to be interviewed about, for example, making sure like, have I talked about education lately? Or has that shown through, right, in my work? Or have I really done any kind of creation around integrity or interviewed those kind of people, whatnot? Yeah. So bringing them to life through the work, you're already doing it, but sometimes making it a little more clear for people helps them distinguish.
Being more direct instead of subtle. And I think that's a really good reminder, because I think that's something we do need to do more often, is not just educate, but then like, maybe it doesn't come through as directly. For example, Keep What You Earn is all about education, but have we actually said that? We deliver education, but do we ever talk about the why behind it, right? And that's an interesting point of view. And I think that that's something that a lot of people don't really, it's not that they struggle with it, but I think it's not instinctive to go there and to kind of peel back the curtain and talk about the why behind it. They just go do the thing because there is a strong why. And that's part of doing the thing. But then share the why, share the exactly like what you're doing, share, the principles that back it up, because then you're really going to find some deeper connections with people, because they're going to find commonality with exactly what you're sharing. And that's a really good point and a good reminder.
Thanks. And I will say that we saw, we use that why is a big question in my work. Mm-hmm. And I love being my own business owner because I can really be that counselor. And it's funny, when you're a consultant, people listen better. When I was an employee, it was like, well, sometimes it comes off as like you're a troublemaker. Or I had one tough leader feel like I was a Debbie Downer. And I'm like, I have to ask what if and why, so that we can imagine a forecast what all could happen, both positive and, let's quite frankly be real, negative about this idea. Right. And build that plan around it. But I think you have a little more leverage and objectivity when you are counseling someone from the outside. It's a little easier to see, for sure.
Yeah, I think it covers the blind spots too. And it's kind of like that thought process of like, I mean, if anyone can relate to me, it's like when your husband or your wife will say the same thing over and over again. And then as soon as your buddy says it, it's like, hey, you know who had a really good idea? And it's like, I've only been saying that for like the last 6 months. So they just need the outside person they also trust. And there's just something about the relationship of the voice that's saying it. And that's a really important thing, to your point.
Yeah. And sometimes it's really just about affirming, this is really working for your organization. This is really working for your brand. There are sometimes I'll meet with clients and, just when I see them in person or see them on Zoom, I'm like, oh, you have it. Like, I just know they have the star quality. They have the charisma. They're likable. Here's how I can help you get ready for a media interview, or you would be a star on stage. Let's prepare you for that opportunity. Why? Is it going to pay off immediately? Like, let's say doing a TED talk, right? Or a TEDx talk in your area. Well, no, it's actually a lot of work. I've prepared a client for that. It's a ton of work and it's super uncomfortable. But the authority that can bring you leads people to say, oh, yeah, I know that person. They'd be great. And they'll remember you to refer you. And so that's what you want, right?
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. In our integrated plans, we advise against social media strategy because sometimes people just are inconsistent or they're making typos in their copy. And I'm like, why are they going to trust you to do their books or their numbers or, take them through healthcare experiences if you can't even spell right in your social media posts? Like things like that matter. Like so many little things add up to trust. But at the end of the day, it's thinking this holistic communication approach to what are all the ways that you can tell a consistent story that makes people care and drives their interest to continue following. They may not buy today, but they may refer you on. I mean, I've had stories just the other day where, a client was saying, hey, 10 years later, somebody had been following us. They weren't in the right organization to hire us for services. And now they finally got that big job or, the big income that they want to make that move. So, I think that it also adds it's almost insurance for your brand too, when something goes wrong to think these ways. So I like to offer that up. And with PR, people think about media relations, and that's a specialty part of the business. It is, in my time, gotten harder over time as the newsrooms have gotten smaller and smaller. But there's certain criteria that makes a story or an opportunity newsworthy and not. And so knowing those criterions and like following that is super helpful. So I include that information in my book and of course for free on my website so that people can understand, well, how can I get that shot at making some news coverage? And so I can speak on that in a whole other podcast episode for sure.
Yeah, right. But could you just share with us the name of your book and your website just so that people can go find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So my website is mvw360.com. And that's because we like to think 360 degrees around communication challenges. And my book is called Smart Talk, Public Relations Essentials All Pros Should Know, because we believe all types of professionals should know these principles for their success. And that's available on Amazon, or you can get that off my website as well.
Perfect. And one of the things I think that is super helpful too is having somebody, like you said, externally consulting, because you can think all you want about your intention of what you're putting out there, but how the message is received is everything, and how people perceive you is a big part of this. So I think it's about, like we were talking about, how you can, leverage these strategies. I think if you are willing to get honest with yourself and ask for the feedback, you can ask. Maybe it's not necessarily close friends and family who care about what they're going to say, but maybe you're asking some of your customers, what words do you associate with me? What comes to mind when you see my posts? Like, what are your reactions, right? Having those honest conversations, because you want to know what you're putting out there and what it's actually generating. And sometimes the feedback is so subtle, it can be so misinterpreted of what's working and what isn't working is only in these metrics. Like you said, you say Britney Spears or talk about that, it's going to skyrocket, but that doesn't mean that's good for your business. So I feel like with these metrics and all these things we're tracking, it's a distraction sometimes from actually just asking the people, what do you think of when I come across your feed?
Absolutely. So another podcaster I listen to is Brian Buffini, and he's known in real estate. And like, I'm sure this is surprising. Like, why is this PR person listening to CPA and real estate mogul and da da da? Well, because of the education that they offer about subjects that really matter. And a lot of it, now he's transitioned his podcast to, he calls it The Good Life. It was the Brian Buffini Show, because he really started centering on the topics. You know what? What am I really talking about here? Well, I'm talking about components of having a good life, right? And he was, telling a story about when he started his real estate business, they started doing that crowdsourcing for information, which is that qualitative or quantitative research phase that we talked about, and saying, how would you describe us to a friend, right? How would you talk about us? Right. And what he thought, what they were using as taglines and brand words was different. And he said what kept coming up was people said, oh, you're just a great negotiator. Like, we throw you in there to negotiate because that's the part like we hate to do and makes us uncomfortable. And so he took the actual terms and started using that on his website and the marketing materials. And of course, like PR materials and whatnot, like a master negotiator. And you're like, oh gosh, yes, I need a negotiator, right? So asking and listening for that feedback is super important. For me, I keep hearing one thing that surprised me is that when I do these different types of opportunities, they're like, oh, or I do trainings or workshops, and like, you have such energy. Like you have such a good energy. And I thought I would never have put that word down for myself.
Come up with, right. There's so many things people tell me too. The same thing where I'm like, really? And I'm like, wow, like it's a self-awareness exercise too of, do you realize what you're putting out there or how you're perceived? And it's a really interesting exercise to go through. Yeah.
So then you use that and work with that flow, right? And say, okay, well, I need to update my speaker sheet or my website to say, energy, right? And put those different components. Like for me, Shannon, I feel like you are a very calming force and that you're steady. And when it comes to numbers and money and whatnot, like as hard as I try and as much as I really try to understand that world, particularly in PR and as a business owner, there are moments where it feels very unsettling to try to really grasp what I'm looking at. And so having an advisor like you, so that steady and forthcoming is going to be really helpful. So I think that if we're listening and asking and just keep evolving your messaging a little bit, keep it to that core value set and that main offering. But what is your special, like they say, right? There's special sauce. Or you're the ranch dressing, right, to the vegetables.
Yeah.
Is that, so I'm not lying.
Yes, you do.
I never lie,
guys. She does listen.
I tell people I'm a PR person. Like in my point of view, like you're not going to catch me in one because I'm either going to know what I'm talking about or I'm going to tell you I don't. So take that tip too.
There you go. So Melissa, just remind everyone again, name of the book and your website so people can find out more about you if they want to explore their own PR plan with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the name of the book is Smart Talk, Public Relations Essentials All Pros Should Know. I really encourage you all to grab a copy off Amazon or go to my website and learn more there. And then go to that website, MVW360.com. I've got links to the book, links to my podcast, free advice and blogs. There's one blog called The 9 Criteria of Newsworthiness. So if you're like, no, really, Melissa, like how do I get on my in the newspaper or on TV, you'll learn about what journalists are looking for there because I know that's often on minds.
Perfect. Thank you so much for hopping on the show today. So much to learn, so much to talk about.
Thanks, Shannon. It was really a pleasure and such an honor for me.
If you're an entrepreneur who's just starting out, it can be overwhelming to think about all the responsibilities you have when it comes to financial management and taxes. Even if you've been binging this podcast, implementing all of it can be really stressful if you don't have a clear list of action steps and know exactly what you should be doing right now. Luckily, we organized all of this for you in the Business Financial Quick Starter. This is your one-stop shop for beginning steps of entrepreneurship so you can build your business confidently from day one. This is not me teaching accounting, no way. It's a specific set of essential action steps to save you a lot of time, money, and headaches as you embark on your own entrepreneurship journey. We cover everything from setting up your business bank account all the way through avoiding a surprise tax bill. Now, as a podcast listener, you get 10% off with code KEEPWHATYOUEARN, all one word. So dive in now and access your Business Financial Quick Starter. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review on your podcast platform. This small action goes a long way for podcasters to get our message heard by more business owners just like you. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to information about our guests and ways to get in touch with me. We'll see you on the next episode.